Today I'm reminded of how lucky I am. To you, I owe my wonderful life. Simply put, Goldie, I cherish you.
For nearly 40 years, Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell have survived the one thing that destroys most Hollywood couples: Hollywood itself. No messy public breakup or endless tabloid wars, just a relationship that somehow lasted through fame, family, and decades of pressure. But now, the couple is finally revealing what really kept them together. And some of the truth has fans seeing their love story in a completely different way. Because behind the smiles and red carpets, things were not always as perfect as they looked. Before they were brangelina, they were barely acquaintances. Every great love story has a beginning that doesn't look like a love story at all. For Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell, that beginning was 1966, and it almost went nowhere. They first crossed paths on the set of Disney's musical The One and Only, Genuine Original Family Band. Goldie was 21, already beginning to make her mark in Hollywood. Kurt was 16, a teenage actor who already carried himself with a quiet confidence unusual for someone his age. By every conventional measure, nothing should have happened. Goldie was 5 years older. Both had a firm personal rule: they would never date another actor. Goldie has recalled thinking Kurt was adorable, but simply too young. That was that. What followed were lives lived fully and independently. Goldie won an Academy Award for Cactus Flower, earned a Best Actress nomination for Private Benjamin, married twice, and had 2 children, Oliver and Kate, with her second husband, Bill Hudson. Kurt built his own formidable career, married actress Susan Hubley, and had a son, Boston. 2 people, separate journeys, and then, in 1983, the paths crossed again. So they'd met once, gone their separate ways, and built entire lives without each other. What were the chances that 17 years later, one hungover audition would change everything? The audition that changed everything. Kurt Russell has told the story of how he and Goldie Hawn got together with the kind of self-deprecating honesty that makes it immediately believable. He was auditioning for Swingshift, a World War II romantic drama that Goldie was already attached to. He was reading lines with her. He was also, by his own admission, severely hungover, not the most auspicious beginning. But something happened in that room that overrode the hangover and the professional caution and the old rule about not dating actors. Russell has said he was struck by her immediately, not just by how she looked, though he has been unambiguous about finding her stunning, but by something harder to define: an energy, a presence. He reportedly blurted out a cheesy comment about her figure that was bold enough to be either charming or disastrous, and somehow landed on the right side of that line. They went on a first date that already had the hallmarks of an adventure. Goldie was renovating a house at the time, and their first evening together apparently involved breaking in. Not a metaphor, but an actual literal entry into a property under construction. It was the kind of story you couldn't invent, and it set a tone for a relationship that has never quite followed the conventional script. The love that developed during the filming of Swingshift was, by all accounts, the real thing. Not the manufactured proximity that sometimes gets mistaken for feeling. Not the intensity of a temporary situation creating an illusion of connection, but something that both of them recognized, even then, as different from what they'd experienced before. For Goldie, what sealed it wasn't what Kurt did for her, it was what he did for her children. Oliver was 6 years old when Russell came into their lives. Kate was 3. They were young enough to be shaped by the presence of a new adult in their world, old enough to form impressions and have feelings about what was happening. Goldie has said with total clarity that watching Kurt interact with her children on the set of Swingshift was the moment she knew. He was amazing with them, she told People. He was such a natural. A man who was genuinely good with children, not performing it, not trying to impress her, just naturally, effortlessly present with them, was a man she could trust. Russell moved into the family home in the Hollywood Hills in 1983. He became Pa to Oliver and Kate. He already had Boston, his son with Susan Hubley. And when Wyatt was born in July 1986, the blended family was complete. 4 children across 3 previous relationships, brought together under one roof by two people who had chosen each other without a contract and intended to keep choosing each other every single day. He won the role. He won her over. And suddenly, there were two adults, 3 children from previous relationships, and one Hollywood Hills home to figure out. So how exactly did they turn that complicated starting point into one of the most successful blended families Hollywood has ever seen? The family they built without a blueprint. The family that Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell built together is, by any measure, one of the great success stories of modern Hollywood parenting. Not because it was conventional, it was the opposite of conventional, but because it worked, deeply and visibly, and across generations. Oliver Hudson has said that Kurt came into his life when he was 5 or 6 years old and essentially raised him. That word, essentially, carries a lot of weight. It means the daily presence, the discipline, the modeling, the late-night conversations, the school runs, the life lessons. Oliver has been direct about it on multiple occasions. "I'm the man I am today because of him." There is no asterisk on that, no qualifier, no mention of his biological father first. Kate has echoed it differently, but with equal conviction. She has called Kurt her savior. She has spoken about him as the constant presence, the steady hand, the father figure who showed up in ways that her biological father, Bill Hudson, ultimately did not. Goldie's divorce from Bill had been finalized in 1986, and his relationship with Oliver and Kate became increasingly strained. A source of pain for both of them that has been documented honestly in various interviews over the years. What Kurt provided, in the absence of that consistent biological paternal relationship, was something that cannot be manufactured or legislated. He offered himself, his time, his attention, his values, his presence. When Oliver and Kate were young, Russell offered to formally adopt them. Both children declined, not out of rejection or complexity, but because, as Oliver later explained on the Sibling Revelry podcast, they didn't feel they needed the paperwork to confirm something that was already real. "We just said, well, we don't need it. The love is right there." It is impossible not to notice the echo of how Goldie and Kurt have approached their own relationship, the refusal to let legal documentation define or validate what they already know to be true. Wyatt, the only biological child of both Goldie and Kurt, grew up in a family that was warm, creative, slightly chaotic in the best possible way, and deeply committed to each other. He played professional ice hockey before injuries redirected him toward acting. He is now a successful actor in his own right, most recognizable to younger audiences from his Marvel work, married, and a father himself. The grandchildren, number 8. Goldie has spoken with unconcealed pride about watching her children become parents, saying they mirror the way they were raised. "What feels good is that they're amazing human beings," she said in 2025. "They happen to be talented. The talent is almost incidental. The human beings are the point. They built a family that worked. 4 children, 8 grandchildren, decades of stability, all without ever walking down the aisle. Which brings us to the question everyone has always asked. If everything was working so perfectly, why did they never just get married? The truth about why they never married. This is the question everyone has always asked. 40-plus years together, 1 biological child, a blended family of 4, a life so thoroughly intertwined that there is no practical distinction between them and a married couple. So why no wedding? Goldie has described herself as a bird, someone who, if the cage door is left open, has no reason to fly away, but close the door and the instinct to escape becomes overwhelming. Marriage, in her framing, is the closing of that door, not because it changes anything practically, but because of what it does psychologically to someone who values autonomy as deeply as she does. When the choice to stay is no longer truly a choice, the quality of the staying changes entirely. Russell's view is different in flavor, but identical in substance. He has said simply, "For people like us, the marriage certificate wasn't going to create anything that otherwise we wouldn't have. The certificate adds nothing. What they have doesn't need it. What they chose instead was something more demanding, not the security of a contract, but the discipline of a daily decision." Goldie has said it plainly. I like the idea that I can wake up in the morning and make decisions every day if I want to be here. That is not a small thing. That is everything. So they made the decision not to marry, and they've stood by it for over 40 years. But deciding not to marry doesn't automatically make a relationship last. So what have they actually been doing? Day after day, decade after decade, to keep this thing alive. For all the years of being asked about their relationship, Goldie and Kurt have been remarkably willing to be specific about what actually makes it work. Not platitudes, not the usual celebrity deflections about communication and respect. Actual, specific, sometimes surprisingly candid answers. Kurt's most quoted formulation is also his most honest. When asked why they've stayed together, he has said, "Let's have fun until we don't." It sounds almost flippant until you sit with it, because it contains a philosophy that most relationship advice completely ignores. The idea that joy is not a byproduct of commitment, but the point of it. They are not together because they promised to be. They are together because it is genuinely better than the alternative. The day it stops being better, the arrangement ends. The fact that it has remained better for over 40 years is not luck. It is the result of two people who have consistently, actively chosen to make it so. Goldie has been equally direct, and in at least one memorable interview, considerably more candid than most public figures are prepared to be. She has spoken about physical intimacy as a genuine, non-negotiable component of what keeps them connected. Not a nice bonus, but a fundamental connector that builds belonging and reinforces the bond in ways that no other element of a relationship quite replicates. She says this not as a younger person infatuated with novelty, but as someone reporting honestly from inside a relationship of over 4 decades. That context matters enormously. Both have also emphasized, consistently and independently, the importance of remaining separate selves within the relationship. Independent finances, independent thoughts, independent social worlds. Neither has been absorbed into the other's identity. Goldie has framed it plainly. Ultimately, staying independent with independent thinking is important, so you can hold on to yourself. Kurt expresses the same idea through behavior. He has a life, friendships, and interests that exist independently of Goldie. They come together as full people, not as halves of a whole. 2 whole people, fully present, choosing each other daily. That is the actual secret. Fun, intimacy, independence, daily choice. It all sounds straightforward when you lay it out like that. But here's the part of their story that the highlight reels tend to skip over. Because it wasn't always this clean, and it wasn't always this certain. Here is the part of the Goldie and Kurt story that tends to get glossed over in the warm coverage of their enduring love. The fact that it has not been uniformly smooth. In the year 2000, and again in 2004, news outlets reported that the couple had separated. Goldie's name was linked during these periods with journalist Charles Glass and with Pakistani cricketer and former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Neither party has ever offered a detailed account of what happened during these periods. The reports may have been exaggerated or misjudged. Celebrity relationships attract this kind of speculation relentlessly, and not all of it is grounded in reality. But the existence of those reports, and the years of distance they implied, is worth acknowledging. What the rough patches actually confirm, rather than undermine, is something important about the structure of what Goldie and Kurt have built. A relationship without legal ties might be expected to be more fragile, more susceptible to drift, more easily dissolved when things get hard. But they came back together. Whatever happened during those years, whatever the distance was or wasn't, they chose each other again. Not because they had to, not because lawyers and assets and shared legal status made leaving complicated, but because the relationship, on balance, remained what they wanted. Goldie has spoken about the necessity of both people genuinely wanting the relationship for it to work. "You've got to give things up," she said. But the joy and the excitement of being together and touching the toes of somebody at night is really a nice feeling. That sentence, with its small, domestic, unglamorous image of touching toes at night, contains more honest relationship wisdom than most advice columns manage in an entire year. She is not describing fireworks. She is describing comfort, continuity, the simple, sustaining warmth of another person present beside you in the ordinary hours of a life. The fact that they navigated turbulence and arrived back at each other repeatedly over 4 decades, is perhaps the most compelling evidence of all that what they have is real. They hit turbulence. They navigated it. They came back to each other, not because they had to, but because they chose to. So after 40 years of all of it, the joy, the difficulty, the choosing, the rebuilding, what does this relationship actually look like right now? What 40 years actually looks like? By 2026, Goldie Hawn is 80 years old and Kurt Russell is turning 75. They have 8 grandchildren. They split their time between homes in Vancouver, Colorado, Manhattan, and California. They still walk red carpets together with the ease of 2 people who genuinely enjoy each other's company, rather than the stiffness of 2 people fulfilling a public obligation. And there are whispers from sources close to the couple that after 4 decades of choosing each other without a certificate, they might finally be considering making it official. Reports have emerged suggesting the couple has been teasing each other about marriage, with comments like, "It's now or never." A blowout party planned for Kurt's 75th birthday in early 2026, involving a rented super yacht in the Mediterranean and all 4 children and grandchildren, is apparently being discussed as a possible venue for a ceremony. Whether that happens or not, and with Goldie and Kurt, the unconventional answer is always more likely than the conventional one. The very fact that it's being discussed says something. Not that they needed the validation of a wedding, but that at this stage of life, the gesture might mean something different than it would have at 40. What 40 years actually looks like, from the outside, is a kind of warmth and ease that is genuinely rare. It looks like 2 people who are still interested in each other, not performing interest, not maintaining the appearance of it for an audience, but genuinely curious about and engaged with the person across the room. It looks like the specific comfort of 2 people who have been through things together and have not merely survived them, but arrived somewhere better on the other side. Goldie's quote from Porter magazine in 2015 may be the best single summary of everything they've built. A lasting relationship isn't about marriage. It's about compatibility and communication. And you both need to want it to work. Being together, 2 pillars holding up the house and the roof, and being different, not having to agree on everything, learning how to deal with not agreeing. Everything's a choice. 2 pillars, separate, strong, holding up the same roof. That's the truth they've been living for 40 years. It was never about the ring. It was always about the choice. 40 years. No wedding, no certificate, no legal document of any kind binding them to each other. Just a daily decision made over and over again for over 4 decades to keep showing up, to keep choosing, to keep making it worth choosing. Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell didn't discover a shortcut or a formula. What they found, and what they've been quietly, consistently living, is something far less glamorous and far more demanding than any romantic ideal. The willingness to stay free, to stay separate enough to remain whole, to prioritize joy over obligation and presence over performance. Most people are waiting for the secret to be more complicated than that. It isn't. If this video changed how you think about relationships, or just about these 2 specifically, drop a comment and tell me what landed. And if you're new here, subscribe. We tell the full stories behind the people and relationships the world thinks it already understands. See you in the next one.